Good evening, everybody. My name is Charity Rouse. I'm the Director of Local History for Spartanburg County Public Libraries in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And this is a program as part of our first Monday genealogy series that we do each year between October and June on the first Monday of the month. And we are looking forward to taking a bit of a deep dive on working with DNA results. This is being recorded and will be placed on the library's YouTube channel at Spartanburg Libraries. And if you look at the genealogy playlist, you can see a lot of additional programs that have been done over the last little while. There is a handout for this presentation. If you are not watching us live, you may email us, contact us in the Kennedy room at spartanburglibraries.org, and we'll be happy to send you that link. Okay, so DNA testing. There's a couple things you need to ask as you're getting started. Why do you want to test? Some people just want to test for ethnicity, um, which is still a very much an educated guess. But you can get some broad outlines. To find relatives. That's why most genealogists test with DNA. And we want to find those relatives. Maybe we've gotten disconnected when the older generation passed on, that we don't know those second and third cousins anymore. And sometimes they inherited the cool stuff and we inherited other cool stuff. So we need to find those relatives. And a lot of people want to see if DNA will help solve a family mystery, which could be adoption, or you find out that you don't have the expected parent or parents. You may be trying to track where your immigrant ancestor came from, and DNA can sometimes help with that if it is recent enough. Um, Sometimes the immigration happened a little too far back, but you may find cousins who may have longer generations or better family stories. Um, I have to do the disclaimer. It is likely that DNA testing will allow some family secrets out into the light of day. Those skeletons will come out of the closet. If you are afraid of finding out about unknown to you adoptions, black sheep of the family, other surprises, don't test. Now, it's still going to come out due to other people testing, but you will not be the guilty person for letting it out into the open. Um, so just know, if you are very nervous about that, you may want to not test. But for those of us who do test, there are some guidelines when we're talking about the privacy of living individuals in the genealogy world and in the DNA world. That genealogical ethics emphasize that you do not talk about living people or show screenshots of their DNA or trees publicly. And this means showing screenshots on social media and YouTube and all of that, unless you have the person's written permission to do so. There are some unethical genealogists out there who live stream their DNA matches without redacting personally identifiable information on their matches, and that's bad ethics. So just know I have done my absolute best to redact the personally identifiable information about living people in this program. Um, Even the ones I have permission to talk about. I try to redact because it's easier to redact everything versus missing something. Within the various genealogy programs and databases, you're welcome to share information with researchers and share and that kind of thing. If you are emailing back and forth in a one-on-one situation, that's different. But you're not putting it out publicly. Hey, we have an unexpected half sibling, without letting that person be the person in control of how their information is being shared. You can use an alias or nickname to anonymize the particular tester if you desire. Sometimes you can work around that and figure out who the person is, but it can at least allow another layer of privacy. So, some definitions, and I think all of these are in your handout. I hope they are. The list kept expanding. Centimorgans, cm, little c, big M, is a unit of measurement for DNA. We are not doing a deep dive into the science of DNA tonight, so that's what you need to know. That is the unit of measurement for DNA. Autosomal DNA, or AtDNA, is the broad across your whole tree DNA. That's what we're talking about tonight. You may also hear people talk about Y-DNA, and that is the straight paternal line for males. Mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, is the maternal line for everyone, but only females can pass that on. X-DNA, you inherit from mom, so men inherit an entire X combined from their mother, and women inherit a combined X from their mother and the full X from dad's mom. So whatever X dad inherited from his mother, women inherit. And that can be helpful in certain circumstances. Each of those three tests can be helpful. But if you got questions about those, email me separately and we'll talk. A haplogroup, you may hear that talked about. This is a big group assigned if you take a Y-DNA test or a mitochondrial DNA test. And this is a grouping from thousands of years ago back to a common ancestor. Um, my maternal haplogroup goes back to about 24,000 years ago. So well outside of genealogical records. My brother's Y-DNA has gotten more defined, but still many, many, many thousands of years ago. So they again can be helpful, but not what we're talking about tonight. You may hear the terms identical by state and identical by descent. So, identical by state, parts of the genome that are associated with a particular region, say Britain or England. England. Well, we'll go with the smaller thing. For those of us with significant English background, you may have matches that match from hundreds of years ago because it's an identical by state match, not because you actually are cousins. Identical by descent is what shows that you are a family member match. So, usually above 20 centimorgans. Some matches below that can be identical by descent, but are often identical by state. Recombination, every generation, when a human is created, you have recombination of DNA. And DNA will swap around, so you're not necessarily getting exact every line of whatever from your parents. There's some swapping around that goes on. That's called recombination. Our MRCA, or MERCA, is our most recent common ancestor. So that person you are trying to say, we share great great grandparents or a great great grandfather, that is the most common recent ancestor. NPE is one of the acronyms used for this. There are a couple of different terms out there. It's the one I tend to use, which is not parent expected. And sometimes you find that you are not the child of the person you thought was your dad, or in some cases, your mom, that you may be the child of some other relationship, or you may be an adoptee. So the NPE is when something shows up in that parent to child relationship that's surprising. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how to cope with finding those folks. So tonight we're going to talk about this autosomal DNA test. And this is the DNA on chromosomes 1 through 22, the non-sex determining chromosomes. XX or XY is chromosome 23, which makes you either male or female. XY is male, XX is female. It is the broad across your whole family tree look at who you are. And it is DNA testing that can connect you with living or recent generations of your family tree. It can be helpful within about 4 to 6 generations, or if you have specific questions about something within those most recent generations. I have seen a few people be able to get some really sticky segments of DNA back further generations, back to about 8 generations back, maybe 9, depending if they've got some much older generations testing. So if you have grandchild, parent, grandparent, and maybe a great grandparent testing, if you get that fourth generation back, they may get you back further because it goes back 4 to 6 generations from their test back. So some people are working with those generations, but it's a lot more difficult. This can give you broader indications of the mix of regions of the world where your ancestors lived and the ethnicity. And then this type of test was released onto the consumer market uh, mostly between 2010 and 2012 when it came out of beta testing for the larger, older companies. So we're only talking, 13 to 15 years. So there's a lot of science that is still being learned on DNA every single day. So things will update, things will change. Your ethnicity definitely will change as they learn more. So let's talk a little bit about inheritance. So this is if everything were in a perfect world, which we all know not so much. You at the bottom there, you know, my brother and me, um, we inherit 100% us. 50% from mom, 50% from dad. We inherited roughly 25% from each of our 4 grandparents, and then 12.5% from each great grandparent. And it keeps having each generation back. We know it's not a perfect world, and you can inherit more or less at each of these lines, other than you inherit 50% of each parent. But they may have a larger or smaller percentage that they pass on to you because of recombination um, on each line of their family. So just know it's not a perfect thing. On the right hand pink girl line, that is where the mtDNA, that mitochondrial DNA, comes down. Both males and females inherit that. And then on the left line, the blue men, that's where the Y-DNA comes down. Those are the only 2 lines that you get either of those from. So, um, as I said, those lines are specifically helpful in certain circumstances for certain questions, but autosomal tells us more about the whole variety of our ancestors. So this is another visualization, a rough estimate if your great grandparents had a solid color, which they don't because they are the mix of their parents and grandparents and great grandparents. But you can see how those colors mix over time and combine and occasionally switch sides. And so you and your siblings each get 50% from mom and 50% from dad, but you may not get the same 50% from each parent. So, testing multiple siblings in your family, as well as testing the oldest living generation, can be extremely helpful in DNA. So, although we're not going to be talking about my tests in particular tonight, I'm using an example from a test I manage with permission. Um, But just to give you a sense of the various testing companies and the sizes of databases that they have, each testing company has a unique population of testers. Many people test with one and one only. Some of us test with all of the above because we're geeks about DNA. Um, and then others, some people do lots of different tests. Um, Different tests are more or less popular around the world. But Ancestry DNA is by and large the hugest. Over 28 million tests were sold, and that's before this holiday season. They probably sold a whole bunch this week. But my total matches, and I have significant colonial Virginia on all four sides of my family, so my numbers of test results are slightly larger than a lot of people's. But I have, and this is from September, had just over 124,000 total matches, broken down with 45,900 paternal and 75,000 maternal. That's very uneven, but my mother's family has significantly more people living than my father's family. Um, so that can skew how many results you get. On 23andMe, they do cap things at 1,500 matches. I have 1,512 because I'd connected with some of those before they dropped off the bottom of my match list. They have also started, there's an upgrade that you can do that you can get, I think, double, like 3,000 matches, something like that. Of those, 361 were paternal, 1,100 were maternal. The only reason I know that on 23andMe is my mother has tested on Ancestry, 23andMe, and Family Tree DNA for me. And I did the who doesn't match my mother, and that was 361. On Family Tree DNA, which is the oldest of the current testing platforms, and where you will find Y and mtDNA, they also show you your X matches. I have 10,600 matches, and those are more evenly paternal and maternal. Um, because I did the who doesn't match mom. Um, that one, that number I'm a little less certain of, but it could be because again, their DNA tests go back a little bit further. My Heritage, which is based in Israel, um, and more popular in Europe. Um, I have about 31,000 matches. They do not divide paternal maternal. I have not had my mother test. My highest match on My Heritage, I think I have 9 above fourth cousin, and they're all like maybe a low second cousin to third cousins. I have better matches on all of the other ones other than Living DNA. I have just over 1,000 matches, and it is out of the UK. And I've got a lot of very small matches from people whose ancestors never left England, and mine who left England 300 to 400 years ago. So, again, a lot of identical by state matches at Living DNA for me. But you may find that those are helpful in different ways depending on the mix of your DNA matches. So, we're going to go over a little bit of the process and then I'm going to show you examples. So, you're almost done looking at all the text. So, you've taken that test. Now what? Well, you've taken and again, we're looking at Ancestry right now because it's the largest and it has some of the more interesting tools to work with. You've taken your DNA test, you receive the results, and you're going, now what am I looking at? Well, you've hopefully built out your basic tree with sources of vital records and marriages and newspapers and censuses and other things. So you at least have started a small tree with family groupings and, at least a direct pedigree associated with your DNA test. If you're working with unknown parentage, compile what information you do know. If you know some family names of cousins or potential names of uh, birth parents because it was in your adoption materials, those types of things. Just get what you know because it can help you eliminate or find what you're looking for. And then we're going to look at ways to use the Ancestry DNA results and the tools, plus basic genealogy research to figure out who that unknown match might be. And these tools and techniques can work with results from other companies. However, other companies have different tools and tree setups, so you need to adapt the concepts. But keep building your tree. Um, a couple of the testing companies do still allow uploads. Family Tree DNA you can upload, and Living DNA you can upload. Ancestry, 23andMe, and MyHeritage, you have to test directly with the testing company. You It's Cyber Monday, you may still be able to get the super cheap tests. Um, there's also a thing called GEDmatch, which is where you can compare tests from different companies. So there's some things to be aware of on Ancestry DNA. There's no actual chromosome browser. What they call a chromosome browser is an ethnicity browser, which very much limits its usefulness. Although some people with more distinctive ethnicity differences can get some good out of it. Um, so be cautious of how you match another tester because you can also match people multiple ways. I have people in my tree that I match 3, 4, 5 different ways. And that means we match higher than our actual match is. Um, so if you're looking at the through lines, remember that is based on other people's trees. So if there are errors in the trees, and there probably are, even the best of us have errors in our trees, you can be led very far off the correct path with the through lines. Um, it's a tool, it can be used. Just be very careful. Ancestry does have what they call the timber algorithm, and they seek to reduce those identical by state matches and give only identical by descent matches, particularly in the higher numbers of DNA matches. So that can be helpful as you're going through. So on your DNA results summary page, this is the one for my friend Jay, and you can see there are a couple of categories that go across the page. The ancestral regions, which I will show you in a moment, that's the ethnicity. The ancestral journeys is where people whose DNA is similar to yours moved and when. So it traces the path of people and the timeline of people moving from, say, the British Isles to the colonies. Um, and the various waves of migration. So it could be the Irish potato famine in the 1840s and moving to the wherever they were moving around the world. For most of us, the United States. Um, so those journeys can be helpful, but just know it is people whose DNA is like yours, but not necessarily this is the journey your ancestors took. Um, the third category is the matches, which we'll look at extensively. And the fourth is traits. And the best I can say about the traits is this is good coffee table conversation. Have a nice conversation at the cocktail party about your eyelash length or whether you have a widow's peak or whether you have attached or detached earlobes. Um, just because the one gene they checked for that says you should doesn't mean you actually do have that trait. So it's good coffee table conversation. So this is the DNA origins for J, and she has 8 ancestral regions. Please note that the colors on the map are geographical areas and not how much that blue says, oh, she's got a lot of blue. No, she's got 1% Finland there at the top. It's just that's the geography that that 1% comes from. That red to the right is the Central and Eastern Europe, which is also about 1%, but it's covering Ukraine and Moldova and Poland and Czechia and Slovenia. So just know you got to look at the percentages to see how big the grouping is. And some of these aren't going to be very helpful with other people of European descent because they're not different enough. And most of us don't have a lot of differences. Now, ethnicity can be very helpful. If you say have one grandparent who's from African continent and one grandparent who is Native American, and then maybe two who are in different parts of Europe, then maybe your ethnicity can help you figure out, but just know everybody else has those four grandparents and they may have different grandparents from those same places. So it can get murky. And they're looking at these ethnicities roughly between 500 and 1200 years ago. Colonial Virginia shows up as, go figure, mostly British Isles. So just know it can be helpful, but isn't a smoking gun. And no, you shouldn't change your lederhosen for a kilt. Can we talk about how much intermarriage between Britain and Germanic Europe there was, especially among the royalty and their hangers on? So, but it can be helpful. It can be fun to know. It can help you know where to look for records. So, on your DNA matches, the categories show very broad levels of relationships, now listed in both centimorgans and total percent shared. So, depending on how your brain works, you've got both options. Parent child, absolutely accurate at somewhere in the neighborhood of 34 to 3,500 centimorgans. Um, the reason you may not have complete matches is sometimes the test doesn't read everything, and sometimes there's just some scramble in the genetic code that something doesn't come out quite as expected. For close family to third cousin, it's a range based on the number of centimorgans shared between the two testers. And there are many possibilities of relationships as you move into the smaller shared amounts of DNA. Ancestry allows you to click on the shared centimorgans to show what possibilities there are. There is a third-party tool called DNApainter.com, and they host a shared centimorgan tool, which was crowdsourced from the genealogy community, and it's a great second opinion and a different way of visualizing, um, slightly different data. Um, and then always remember there is a possibility that you may match someone in multiple ways, thus increasing the amount of DNA that you share with them. I have some people who show up as solid second cousins. We are third cousins once removed twice, fourth cousins once removed once, fifth cousin once removed at least twice. So we're just getting a lot more DNA from the same families simply because we are related in multiple ways. So it's not always, somebody cheated. It's do your research and figure it out. So here's our process, and then we're going to work our way through the process. Go to your match list. You choose whatever match you want to look at. You look at the match's amount of shared centimorgans with you. You look at their attached tree and suggested ancestors, if they have them. Many people don't. You go to your tree. Do you have this match or their ancestors or people in their tree in your tree already? If you don't, build your tree out to include this match. Make notes in your tree and their match page about the DNA match, how you match, what branches of the family you're on, that kind of information. And then you look at their closest matches and see if you can add those to the tree because you're looking for these family groups. They make it easier to identify who they are, especially if they have common names. And then you repeat. You keep doing the cycle. So this is my friend Jay's match page. And you see close family. You've got KB at the top, M. Davis, JK, DW going down the page. One helpful thing is Ancestry does now um, break things down by parent. And they keep switching who can see it and what subscription level you have to be at to be able to see this. But I think it's now for all subscription levels for DNA. Um, and if you click on the by parent up there where the yellow arrow is pointing, you go to this sheet and it says parent one. She has 25,000 or 24,500 matches in parent one. Surnames Davis, Ayers, Hoffman, Brocking. And then parent two with 26,700 matches roughly with Atwell and Burrell and Kleinbell spelled a couple ways. Now, knowing what I know that parent two is paternal. Parent one is paternal, parent two is maternal. If you go down the page, keep scrolling, you'll see some 56 matches match on both sides. So there is some intermingling somewhere in this tree, the greater tree. Now, when I clicked on that, because I always check that first, um, and these are very small matches. So not the first thing we look at. If you're finding first cousins on both sides or second cousins on both sides, take a real deep dive on that one. But if they're little teeny 20 centimorgan matches, not so much to worry about. And then unassigned. Ancestry cycles through the matches, 28 million users. Um, they cycle through the matches periodically. So new testers may not get assigned immediately. So, um, total matches, Jay has just over 52,500 matches. Remember, mine was 124,000 and change. So these are more typical numbers that you would see in your DNA matches. So back to the main match page. And we're going to look at this top match. Close family is usually the easiest to identify and the most helpful. So we have the match name. They're using initials. It does say they're managed by someone else, which is a key to often that's a family member, not always, because I manage J's. Um, it will tell you, okay, we're predicting this person is first cousin or half aunt on parent one side, paternal side, and have 818 centimorgans or 12% shared DNA. Oh, goody. They have a tree, public link tree, that has 80 people in it. You don't want one private person in the tree. You want a decent tree so that you can compare. And Ancestry recommends that there is a common ancestor. So when I click on KB, I come to this page. It tells us the same information. Um, if you click the 12% shared DNA link, it takes you to this page that tells you the predicted relationships. So 89% frequency, the relationship at this connection of DNA, if there is only one connection, is first cousin, half aunt, half niece, grand aunt, grand niece, great grandmother, or great granddaughter. So it's a solidly good connection. And age can sometimes help with this. Grandparent has to be older than a grandchild, or aunt In niece, not so much because in larger families, generations may merge and cross. So don't make too many assumptions about age, but it can be a good way to sort things. Um, so, and again, it says 5% could be a half first cousin. There are other options. And it goes down the page. So, back to the KB's match page there. You will see they're saying common ancestors are from the two trees, and they are saying that the shared ancestor is Daniel Webster Davis and Mary Loper Davis. Okay. And then they show you a brief portion of the tree that is the most common. It is supposed to start with a DNA tester. I have seen ones that don't. To be a DNA tester, you have to have been alive when DNA testing was happening, and circa 2010. I saw a tree the other day that had a DNA match that the person died in 1948. Can't be the DNA tester. Cannot be the DNA tester. So some people didn't get everything hooked up right. So you got to be skeptical. You've got to think through that. But this is a good trait. You see the Daniel Davis, you see Mary Loper, you see on back in the DNA. And so moving over to Jay's tree that I've been helping build, um, you've got Ollie or um, uh, and I just blanked on there. It's been spelled multiple different ways. And Estella there at the top. You've got, oh look, Daniel Davis and Mary Loper. And I managed to take this screenshot before I built out more of her tree. But so I was making sure, do I have all of the siblings of Daniel in the tree? What about all of the children of Daniel and Mary? So this is Mary Loper Davis's profile and tells birth, death is in there. Um, okay, I've got a couple of marriage indexes and things. And so I am looking at those. I am adding. This one just struck me as somewhat amusing. Daniel Davis, son of Anley, that's the other version of it. It's Ollie. C. Davis of Shiloh and Miss Mary Loper, daughter of Benjamin Loper of Bridgeton, were united in marriage on Saturday evening, February 4th, at Shiloh. The marriage proved to be a real surprise to their many friends. The bridegroom is employed by the W.L. Hurley Company. So, apparently, this was a surprise to most people, but we have information about who their parents were, at least their fathers. Unfortunately, for much of history, the mothers are Mrs. Father's name. And you get an employer for the bridegroom, and you get a location of the marriage. So added those things. You see that Mary Loper's profile is filled in further, names of children, all the records that have been looked at, including divorces. Now, I did have to call Jay and say, okay, what can you tell me about your grandparents on the Davis side? And so the Florida New Jersey connection was confirmed, which also makes it easier. Don't hesitate to ask people questions if you have them there to ask. Doing it all by paper is a little bit harder if you don't have someone who you can ask for confirmation of what you're finding. Now, what they tell you may not be, that may be the family story, but it may not be the actual. So you gotta compare and contrast both of them. Well, as I was going through and making sure I had all of their children, I saw the sibling of Jay's father that had the some of the obituary information. This is um, Ted Davis's, Daniel Webster Davis's obituary. He died at 91. A lot of this family lives nice long lives. And it tells us more about his life, survivors, the second wife, Ruth, the sons, the brothers, sister, so and locations where they're living, which also proves some of the Florida connection. And then 12 grandchildren and 12 great grandchildren. So I know I've got to build out at minimum 12 grandchildren, 12 great grandchildren as of uh anyway. Um I thought I put the year in my notes, but this is a few years ago. So, in the tree associated with KB's DNA, mentioned parent, father, and their name, Norman. And so I started researching Norman so I could start proving the parent to child relationships. Found a marriage in 1950, so keep tracking down the paper trail. So back down to KB. I filled in some information. They are living. There is a child by those initials. It's a married surname initial. And under the name there, there's a little pencil where the arrow is pointing. And if you click that, you can bring up some tree tags and notes that you can make on your person. And these can be really, really helpful once your tree gets above, 20 or 30 people. It's hard to keep them all straight in your brain. So KB is confirmed as a DNA match. So I clicked that under DNA tags there on the right. And then I went back to the DNA match list, KB at the top there. And on the right hand side, there is the add button. The add button allows us to add or edit a relationship. I haven't, it's first cousin, but I haven't changed that. But I have added or edited groups. And then that add or edit note, if you see on the bottom of that, there's the little bottom left, there's a little 818 centimorgan shared across 36 DNA segments, possible Davis line, and then my initials and the date. Um, Before Ancestry gave us as robust tools and with the color coding, this is how I was keeping track of where the connection was as I was sorting through the matches. Now I am going to add and or edit groups. And I am going to, I at the top there, there's a create a new group and you can choose. Ancestry used to let you do starred or not starred. Terribly helpful for sorting. Now they have many, many, many colors. Um, and so I have added surname groups for Davis, Loper, and I have in my working thing, I always do a green in the tree because sometimes I know who they are, but I don't know where they fit in the tree. And that lets me know that I haven't gotten them placed in the tree yet, but I need to go back and do that, or they're in the tree. I can go look at them. And so I've created the groups, and in the match list now, I have the Davis, Loper, and in the tree for KB. Now, we're going back to KB's tree or page, and that third option on the right, the tree was the first one on the left. If you click on shared matches, and now I do pay the extra in South Carolina, it's $10.70 with tax every month to do the shared matches pro tool. I find it worth the money worth spending. You can, that is independent of your Ancestry subscription, and you can turn it on for a month and then turn it off. That one is a lot more um, turn off and turn onable than any of their other subscriptions. But under shared matches, this list is sorted by Jay's priority of matches. On the right hand, where the red arrow is, you can see the sort. And you can um, sort by KB's relationship. So I want to know what's the difference between KB's relationship and Jay's relationship. So with KB's relationship, the top match becomes JK. And you can see on JK, they match J at 553 centimorgans, and they match KB at 590 centimorgans. And so looks like they're one generation down. So since J and KB are both grandchildren of Daniel Webster Davis, then JK is likely to be a great grandchild of. And so, okay, let's look at the great grandchildren and let's look at JK's match list. And lo and behold, JK's match list tells us W. Davis and M. Davis are brothers. So we now have three siblings and one family. And so you can start putting it together and you figure out, okay, here are the grandchildren. And so I found the obituary for their father, um, and sorry, their grandfather, another one of the brothers, and Marvin. And then it says, here are the survivors: wife, sons, grandchildren, and great grandson, and then brothers. And so all of a sudden, we're starting to put these family units together and build our tree out and match our DNA matches in. So we're looking back at a little lower on Jay's tree. And so we've got the Jay's parents' generation. KB is there under Norman, and Jay is to the right on this screen. And then we've got the the children of Marvin on the left there, and the grandchildren of Marvin. And I've identified a spouse for the daughter, so JB, or JK, sorry, JK, and then the two sons. And those are all marked as DNA matches. So if we go back to our diagram of research, we've gone to our match list. We've chosen our first match. So that was KB. We've looked at the match's amount of centimorgan and determined we're looking in probably that first cousin range. Maybe an aunt, but probably first cousin or great aunt. We've looked at their attached tree, and they had one. None of these others did, but working between the tree I had built for Jay and the tree that KB had, or yeah, KB had, I was able to determine more of the family members. Those little living pink girls and blue boys can certainly help add things up sometimes. Gone to our tree. We have added the match to our tree. We've built out that tree to include the match. We've made notes in both our tree and their match page about the DNA match so that we know when we go back, we know what we were thinking in the process. We've looked at their closest matches and further built out the tree. And we keep repeating this. It's a circular kind of thing. It's not one and done. and you keep repeating. Now, there are some matches that you may have to say, I don't have enough information. We don't have enough high shared matches to work with this one yet. And so you go to the next one. I have worked on all of my top 100 matches and more in my tree, and it takes time. This is over years. I did my first DNA test in 2015. So I've been working on this for 10 years. So, um, so you keep repeating the process. There are some additional resources. DNApainter.com, I mentioned earlier. There are some paid additional tools, but there are also the shared Centimorgan tool is great. What are the odds tool? If you're running into a situation that you want to build a situation out, a simulation out, I think you can do one free at a time on the What are the odds tool. And in the pay subscription, you can do more. There's a leads method, which is grouping your matches by lines, which Dana Leeds developed years ago before auto clustering and things like that. Ancestry now has an auto cluster tool, which can be helpful, but there are times when it's really good to do it yourself by hand. Now, just know I did the Leeds method. I came out with 5 colors, none of which were my paternal grandfather's lines. Because we got some halves going on and we've got doubles going on in my mom's side of the family. My highest match on my dad's paternal line is 74 centimorgans. Leeds method goes down to 90 centimorgans, goes from 400 down to 90. And so you may find that one or more of your lines just does not exist in those DNA matches because no one has tested or no one is alive. My father was an only grandchild. My brother and I are only great grandchildren. And my father died prior to DNA testing. He would have been first in line. He really would have. So it's one of those situations where sometimes you don't have all of the information and you've got to look at it critically. There are some other more advanced resources available depending on how complex your tree becomes. I've been working my way through how to work with Banyan DNA, which is set up so that you can have multiple relationships in those messy, messy trees like mine is. Um, and so stay tuned because it's helping. So, some conclusions. It can really help to test the oldest living generation on each line if possible. Here are some stats from my mother and myself. As I said, she's tested on 3 companies now for me. On Ancestry, my mother has 254 matches between 90 and 400 centimorgans. This is as of September. I only have 76. One generation back on a side of the family that has that many DNA matches, she has exponentially more matches in that range. There are some tools that will do auto clustering, as I said just a moment ago. It can really help you learn your tree and your matches if you do the work yourself via the leads method. Not all of, my 76 is not that bad, and it's not all of those because 76 includes my mom, my aunt, and a couple high matches that are above that 400 centimorgan range. Um, don't jump to conclusions. I could have jumped to conclusions that my father wasn't who his family said he was. Well, no, there's just nobody around to test because he was an only grandchild and I'm a great grandchild, and people didn't test on that side of the family, and the one living cousin that I have contact with won't test. So it is what it is. Um, make notes about where you think you have a DNA match with that person and then do the research to see if you can verify the connection. Don't jump to the conclusion that that unexpected high match is whatever bucket Ancestry said they're in. because you may be related in multiple ways, and it may not be that unknown half sibling. It may be an unknown half first cousin or something like that. So don't torpedo the family relationships until you actually have real information. You can always reach out to a match. I don't have a great response rate, but Ancestry's messaging system is notoriously buggy, and my profile is pretty forbidding and unfriendly. If you have a picture of yourself, and particularly if you have a pet in that picture, you may get much better results. If you look friendly in your profile, you may get a better response rate. Many people do test for ethnicity, don't use the results, or think about them again. If someone has found a not expected parent or other unexpected relationship, they may need time to come to grips with it. So they may take a break of sometimes even a couple of years between times when they look at their DNA tests. So you can message them. It may take a while for them to get back. Somebody on one of the groups I'm in said, you know what? 7 years ago, I sent this message. They just responded last week. So you may find out something down the road. So, even if someone does not have a tree, you can use these methods to potentially identify them. Initials can be helpful. Sometimes nicknames can be helpful. If they have a close DNA match, like a sibling who has more information on their account, then you can often figure out where they fit in. I have a lot of people in my tree with just their DNA, their username as a placeholder. I know where they fit. I know they are a child of these people, but I don't know their name, and I don't know which of the five daughters they are. And but I've got them in with their username as the placeholder until I find out more information. So, um, I have found connections on other DNA sites for the same username or the same profile picture. And they have more, some people build their primary tree on MyHeritage versus Ancestry. Some do on Ancestry versus any of the others. Um, so, and the other ones don't allow you to build a tree on there. 23andMe has a funky tree. They try to predict based on your DNA results, and it's pretty off on my family because we're related in too many ways. So, but you may find more information at a different match place. And then traditional paper trail research, such as obituaries, can give some of the tools needed. And all those living pink and blue boxes on someone's tree may add up to the listed descendants in an obituary. If you're off a couple of kids, those kids may have been born after the obituary, or they may have predeceased the person in the obituary and may not be listed, but they can help you connect the dots. So put the pieces together. Okay, so are
Mhm.
there questions?
So far, no questions in the chat box, but I have a question. I
Okay.
haven't I haven't purchased the Pro Tools things yet because
Hmm.
I've been looking at other things and doing other things with my ancestry and haven't really concentrated going back looking over my DNA results and stuff like that.
Hmm.
How helpful is it worth the money and to get it, or is there just like one tool that is better than all the rest?
Um,
I'm trying to figure out whether I want to pay for it.
yeah. Well, and I would say because that is you can turn it on for a month and then cancel until you want it again. I would turn it on for a month and have your series of questions or the mystery matches that you want to look at, because being able to group the matches by how the other person shares DNA with them gives
Hmm.
you family groups. And you can build the tree from those family groups much more easily than you can from individuals.
Okay.
Now, sometimes you get the people like I have a DNA match that we don't have shared matches that are above about 25 centimorgans. I mean, they're really, really low. And so that's not so helpful there. But if you can get a couple of pretty decent matches, in a little family group or figure out how these guys are second cousins or first cousins or siblings, then that can really help build your tree and answer the questions.
Okay.
But if you're not using it on a regular basis, that is $10.70 with tax in South Carolina. Your mileage may vary. Um, it is an added expense. Now,
Okay.
I now subscribe to the Ancestry Family Plan with all the bells and whistles. And there are five of us in the account. So we divide out the costs of it between us, and so we get newspapers, we get Fold 3, we get Ancestry, and newspapers is Publisher Extra Edition. So we actually, you, I may be the only one using it, but it gives us the ability to have more people using. And
Well,
one of the others uses it fairly often. The other ones, not as much, but um, it helps. But my Pro Tools only covers my account. But if somebody shares a tree or shares their DNA matches with me and wants me to look at them, I can use my Pro Tools on their tree or their DNA matches.
oh, well, that's
If I
cool.
have a collaborator or editor or whatever they're calling it now. You don't have
Yeah.
to be a manager or an owner of an account, but you can be another level down. You can't just be a viewer, I don't think. So,
Well, I
but yeah,
think I'll start the new year off right and get a month's worth of Pro Tools and check it out. Thanks so
yep.
much. Okay,
And
so
I
there,
find it to be really helpful. So,
good. Well, I'm glad you're there because I can just ask you things
yes, you can
if I
just
run
ask
into
me.
trouble. Exactly.
Now,
Well, there are no other questions here.
okay. So everybody else, did I just fire hose you with this? Or are you going to come back and rewatch it and figure out and follow the process and see what you can figure out? Um, but yeah, and I really do like those Pro Tools because being able to see the shared matches and how they share, I was getting nowhere on a high mystery match in my tree until I was able to see, oh, the brother's a half brother and we're related through both parents. Okay. So, there's some things that um once you know how they match other people, it really can answer some questions.
Yeah.
Now, does it answer every question? Absolutely not. DNA is not a magic bullet, and there's still a lot of paper trail research you have to do. But hopefully this
Well,
shows how to move back and forth between the two things and get it figured out a little bit more.
and I think like
So,
Cindy just posted in the chat is you'll probably benefit by watching this video more than once and taking it a piece at a time and doing
yep.
what
Well,
you
and don't
suggested.
hesitate to email us at kroom@infodepot.org. It's on the screen. Um, and or call us at that's the Kennedy Room desk number. Um, and we'll be happy to help. I do most of the DNA reference, but a number of the staff in the room have DNA experience and they can at least answer basic questions for you. If you stump them, they'll send you to me. Um, but we're happy to help. If you did not, we're not able to get the handout live, please feel free to email that email address and we will get you the link to the handout because the handout has a whole bunch more because it's from the 2 hour workshop. So awesome. Well,
Okay.
thank you, everybody. Hope to see you next month on Monday, January 5th, 7 p.m. here on Zoom. And we'll be looking at wills, estates, and probate records. Thank you so much. And we can hit stop on the recording.